Okay, so it's a little past 6:30, so we're going to call this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee to order. And should I just go to the first? Okay, so the first item on the agenda is public comment. So public comment is limited to 10 minutes with no more than 2 minutes. I'm hearing it again. It's all good. With no more than 2 minutes allocated to any one speaker. It's limited to items that are not on the agenda. Is there anybody in the waiting room who wants to speak?
No one.
Or in the room?
We should do roll call.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The very first thing, I've already forgot something. We need to do a roll call. And I believe we do have a quorum.
This is the roll call for the meeting for today. Sharish Bhatia, Peggy Briggs, Brian Conway.
Here.
Brian's here. Kathy Kukalo.
Here.
Thank you. Eric Dahlberg.
Yeah.
John Garofalo.
Here.
Pat Geyer, here. Gerard Jansen. Don Kupka.
Here.
Lindsay List.
Here.
Carlin Reed. Paul Rodriguez.
Here.
Quasi Sajuzaman. Shri Tupel.
Yeah.
And Lois Wassoff.
Here,
Thank you. We have a quorum.
and I think Peggy Briggs just joined.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now we can move to public comment. I don't see anybody in the room who would like to speak. Is there anyone online now who'd like to speak, Ryan?
No, I don't think there's anybody.
Okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is correspondence. Although there's nothing in our packet, there was one late item added that was emailed to the Finance Committee, which we will add to the packet, I think, after the fact. And it was from Lori to Lois, forwarding information about a new initiative at the high school called the Vision of a Graduate Initiative, which is kicking off. And it kind of explains what is the vision of a graduate, and it's seeking perspectives of parents, of teachers, of educators, students, people in the community. So does anyone have any questions about the correspondence or any comments? They're trying to figure out what do we want a graduate to look like in terms of skills, attributes, dispositions, and so that we know every graduate is kind of meeting the needs of these different stakeholders, or what we all see as the vision for graduates. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the meeting minutes from September 25th and approving those minutes. I did notice one item in the minutes that needed adjustment. So on page 4 of the minutes, which is the final page of the minutes, in the second paragraph, it says members question whether the guidelines baseline is an appropriate starting point, whether the capital plan discussion should include a look at depreciation schedules, and whether a better guideline for capital spending is a % of operating budget. I said is a % of assets or operating budget. Does anyone else have, on the final page of the minutes? Under the paragraph that starts with members questioned. Any other comments about the minutes? All right, so should we vote to approve the minutes?
Have to do a roll call.
So a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
We'll do a roll call now.
Discussion.
Okay, roll call.
Discussion.
Peggy Briggs. Brian Conway.
Present.
This is the
Sorry, I
roll
just
call.
put on my
for the
microphone. I was
motion to
absent for that
approve
meeting.
Minutes
Oh,
as amended.
okay, Peggy just spoke for a moment here. She didn't approve, she said I wasn't there.
She's not.
So let's start over with a roll call to, not a roll call, a vote on whether to approve the meeting minutes as amended, right? For September 25th, 2025.
I will conduct the roll call. Peggy Briggs?
Abstain, I was absent from that meeting.
Thank you. Brian Conway?
I'm at this meeting. Is this on the last meeting?
That's good. Kathy Kupalo? Yes. Eric Dahlberg?
Yes.
John Garofalo?
Yes.
Pat Geyer? Yes. Don?
Yes.
Yep. Lindsay List?
Yes.
Paul Rodriguez?
Yes.
Sri Tupel?
Yes.
And Lois Washoff?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So they are approved as amended.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we're marching through the agenda here. The next agenda item is liaison reports. So we have a detailed review of liaison reports in the meeting packet. If anyone has any updates that weren't included in the packet, if you could briefly provide updates today, that would be great. For the Concord Municipal Housing Trust, there was a meeting that I have not been able to watch yet, so I will provide my minutes at my update at the next Finance Committee meeting for that one. But does anyone else have any updates? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I have one for the Economic Vitality Committee. There is a meeting next week, but I just realized that I hadn't provided for the last meeting, so I'll just update it. There was a focus on creating some periodic forums for topics focused on the business community. They're like maybe once a quarter, maybe a little bit more accelerated to move over the summer. Some highlighted items could be talking about transportation, cell towers, wastewater, but really focused on things that the business community would like to talk about and kind of find ways to encourage other committees or other parts of the town to be in part of that discussion. So that, I think that's the big thing from that meeting.
Fantastic.
I had a meeting for Minuteman Tech, or I had a comment for Minuteman Tech. I didn't send it in with the written notes. I've met with Dee Ortner twice and also got introduced to the Julie Pisegna, and I'm planning on attending the meeting on the 21st of October, which is a school board meeting. Dee is the person who sits on the school board for Concord, and she did not have any material updates when I spoke with her about 2 weeks ago.
Madam Chair, Peggy has her hand raised.
Okay, go ahead.
Raised. I don't know about
Yeah.
over here.
Go ahead, Peggy.
Yes, so for the Community Preservation Committee, they have a current request level of about 5 million. The available funds include a state match of 16%. That's down from 18% last year, but hey, still money from the state. And the requests, so that means that they right now are projecting about 3.5 million, leaving us 1.5 short, 1.5 million short. So they will be making some difficult decisions. They've been hearing from the applicants. They did a site visit last Saturday, and I think probably of the most interest to most of us is the high school amenities building is requesting 1,418,000. And a lot of the there are a number of very worthy requests, and some of them are sort of back funding, or funding a reserve account. So those might be up for discussion. And I haven't heard any more. There has been no further discussion of any potential bonding by the CPC for the amenities building. That was briefly brought up by one of the members, but right now they're just in a listening mode. Okay.
When do they typically make that decision, Peggy? Do you know?
Yeah,
About
we'll be in November.
in November.
Yeah, November. Which, of course, is only a month away.
Anyone else have any updates? Okay. All right, hold on. All right, so the next item on our agenda, I believe, is the financial policy working group. I don't know if there's any updates from that working group that you want to share.
Yeah, no, I would say no, nothing to update at this time.
Okay. Do you expect to have updates next month, you think?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Great. Okay, and then we're going to have our next item on the agenda is Concord Public Schools' response to the FinCom's information requests. And here we're going to be hearing a presentation from CPS School Superintendent Lori Hunter and the Finance Director regarding our annual budget data request. And we've received a lot of information from the schools, which we greatly appreciate. So this will be a great chance to dig into it some more.
I'm gonna move back and allow the superintendent and the business manager to come up front. So maybe I'll share the screen. Oh, let me get out. Let's go with that. Good evening.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Glad to be
welcome.
here. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'll just sort of set some context while Bob pulls up the document and the slides. We were able to do a pretty deep dive at your request and to put together a lot of information of varying types and kinds. So we're happy to talk through highlights of that or answer questions. We're not going to read it to you, but we'll certainly want to engage with you about any pieces you want to follow up on. And then we also have put together the 5-year projections as you asked for. The caveat always being the closer years are more reliable, the farther out, the less. We are in the process of beginning to build budgets now. The principals and department heads are getting into that work. They're due back to us at the end of the month. We will have a better sense as November plays out. We are formally presenting to the school committee in December, but November is when we're aggregating, and that's when the picture starts to come together. But the first pass, I think, is a good, helpful piece of information for all of you. It sets the framework for us. I think there's numbers in here you're going to like, which much is because we need to thank you for the responsiveness over the last couple of years as we faced some challenges, especially with out-of-district tuitions. And as we tell you every year, those numbers change depending on the kids, and we're seeing some shifting, mostly with students aging out or graduating, and I think that will give you some feedback that you helped us get through the bubble, and we're coming out the other side. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob. We are here now to talk about Concord Public Schools. The one thing we thought, because we did this last week with the school committee, we ended up being really very redundant because we did the whole thing twice. We thought we'd highlight what was pertinent only to Concord in this portion of the meeting, and then do the things that are more applicable to both or just the high school with Carlisle here at 7:30. So if that makes sense to you, I think it'll make your evening a little more efficient too.
Yeah,
Okay,
perfect.
Great. So we're going to focus on the Concord Public Schools for a little bit.
So I've shared the memo here. As I go through it, I think it's probably easier for you to ask questions while we're talking about something instead of trying to remember it later. So feel free to just pause if you have a question when I get through a section, perhaps. Just to start off with, I just want to note that we still are operating a zero-based budget process for everything in our budget, every position, every supply, every material, every software subscription. So that's a core part of our process that each of the schools includes in their submission to us, and Dr. Hunter and I support. So I just wanted to highlight that. The projections I'm going to do at the end, through a separate attachment. In terms of our spending levels, looking at our plan and kind of what we see our needs are, in terms of what we see now, there are some things in our strategic plan. Many of those don't require additional funding. Some of them might. Some of them we might try to fund just through savings in other areas. There might be some one-time costs. What we highlighted here is one that is a little bit more substantial. We have ELA specialist roles built into each of our elementary schools to provide support in ELA instruction. We don't have math specialists. That was set up as kind of combined into the assistant principal role. And that's something that, as we look out over the next few years, is something we're going to see if there's opportunities, potentially for reallocation of resources to look to have a math specialist role potentially in the buildings. Anyway, just wanted to highlight that as a kind of a long-term potential spending level. And it might not be a spending level change in total. It might be a reallocation. In terms of the FY25 year-end update, I'll click on the link and call that up. So a few things to highlight. We've essentially spent all of our budget, and I'll go through that. First, I'm going to highlight grants. We received a substantial amount of grant funding, primarily for IDA, and that is shown here. These are the grant funding we received for each district. The IDA grant funding at the federal level is $551,000. We received METCO granting. That's actually a state grant we receive each year, similar amount. The ones highlighted in that kind of shaded pinkish color are competitive grants. We're not guaranteed to get those. We can apply, and this year we did receive them. The first column is Concord Public Schools. There is some risk on Title I up at the top. You can see that $70,000. We've heard at the federal level there could potentially be some reductions there. I've heard like 20% mentioned. That would equate to $15,000. So there's some risk there, but it's not substantial. IDA, we haven't heard that same risk yet. Separate issue of them having the staff to manage these programs, but in terms of the funding right now, those are, to what we know so far, fairly solid. The last one at the bottom is the homeless support grant. Just wanted to highlight that funding is essentially going to be gone, but that was a tremendous support to us to get through and support the students at the shelter. All of that is used for essentially incremental staff. I think I highlighted that elsewhere in the memo, and I'll circle back to that. In terms of revolving funds, we have three main revolving funds. School lunch, the school lunch program is basically a self-funded program. You can see it started and ended the year in essentially the same place. The ending balance of $179,000. Circuit breaker is, I included information in the memo at the end on how that's calculated, but for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a program the state has to provide funding for high costs, excessive costs of special education. Once you reach above a certain threshold, that's say approximately $55,000, they'll reimburse 3/4 of the additional costs above that. We received a little bit more, a positive surprise at the end of the year. The reimbursement rate is typically 75% for tuition costs, and they have a lower reimbursement rate for the transportation to transport students to these out-of-district placements. There was legislation in the fourth quarter of FY25 that fully funded the transportation at 75. The impact to us was an additional $85,688 in revenues. So otherwise, we would have had a slight drawdown in our circuit breaker. Preschool, we charge tuitions to students, to some of the students, some integrated programs, some special education, some regular education students. Those that pay tuition, it funds a portion of the preschool program, and we spend that down every year intentionally. In terms of year-end, you can see we basically spent all but $987 of our budget. We did absorb some some pressures. So the homeless transportation costs in the 3,000 line, you can see that in the second column, what the school committee approves is the transfers between these funding categories. So we had pressure in the other school services category, and 306,000 of that is homeless transportation. 76,000 of that was covered by supplemental appropriation at town meeting. If you recall the language, we have an additional 76,000 appropriated for the reimbursement we get for McKinney-Vento. But the homeless transportation put some pressure on the budget. We were able to offset that through savings in other areas from, in some cases, savings. In some cases, we received a grant, for example, to fund some ELA program costs that we had planned to spend, but we received a competitive grant for. And we also we made an elective decision to push out a bus order at the end of '25, and we usually do it to the beginning of FY '26 that saves some money. So a lot of moving pieces on this, but in the end, we were able to get through the year, and I think we landed in a good place through that. That's the, I'll close this tab now.
So just on the homeless, to clarify, we had to expend that amount of money last year, and so this year's town meeting warrant, we're hopeful we'll have the same. Let me clarify this. There was an amount at last year's town meeting that we received. There's always this lag of the homeless reimbursement, the transportation. So there will be some funds coming back to us that we're hoping to use to put circuit breaker back, the special ed subsidy. We had to dip into that more than we normally would as a means of managing all of this, which we're just very grateful for the collaboration there, since the reimbursement for the homeless transportation goes to the town, and there's been that mechanism to help it make its way back to the schools. So the shelter is closed, just status update, I know you know that. We have 5 students who were not placed in housing before school opened. That was actually better than, we were very nervous because any child that hadn't received housing had rights to stay with us for the rest of this year. So there were 5, they were actually moved to a different shelter when the shelter closed on July 31st, and they did not receive housing before we opened school at the end of August. They have housing now, which is great, and they have the right to stay for the rest of the year. So we'll have a little bit of lingering transportation, but nothing close to what we've been managing.
Is there any, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there any risk that the state will try, I mean, anything's always possible, but do you foresee any risk that the state will try to claw back the homeless funding, given that the shelter's closed?
It's a federal program and has been very well subsidized, not just through the state funding system, but at 100% typically. So we're not saying never to anything right now, but I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah,
It's good.
I don't think, the money was allocated, it's been spent. Like, they don't have any clawback provisions in the legislation for that.
It's good.
They could say they're not gonna fund next year's reimbursement, which is different.
Right.
But looking back at the history, I don't think they've ever not done that in the time I've been doing this, which is 10 years.
Yeah.
As far as FY '26 goes, it's early. We're less than 2 months into the school year. I typically provide my first update late October on FY '26. What I can tell you is we don't have the same pressures that we did last year. Last year I knew we had $300,000 in homeless transportation that we have to find a way to cover through other means. And in the regional district we have different pressures, but we're in decent shape, knock on wood. But we'll share an update with that at our next school committee meeting. Our top issues remain, our first one always remains maintaining high quality in district special education, not just for the financial side. You know, for our students, it's best for them to be in district with their peers in our schools. And we have some good programs to do that for most situations. You know, it ends up being financially beneficial as well. It's less expensive than out of district. So it's a win-win. Thank you. And enrollment projections is an issue that we're thinking is going to become more of a focus for us. We did a little bit more work on it, particularly for the region this year. But the housing developments and kind of keeping an eye on what that does with enrollments is something we're going to focus on. It's early at this point, but I think that's going to kind of be in our radar as we go forward. And then we're looking at, we have a new assistant superintendent of teaching and learning on board. They've looked at ELA curriculum this year and into next year that they're rolling out for the elementary schools. And the idea and plan is to develop a rolling multi-year plan that looks at different subject areas, evaluates the curriculum, whether what we have now is sufficient, whether there's a newer version of it, whether we want to look at a whole different program. Our existing budget dollars may cover some of that, might just be changing the program, but there might be cases where we make a decision that we think could have some cost impact. Not anticipating that will have a cost impact in FY '27.
And we've been watching very carefully the competitive state grants. We were very successful with the English Language Arts program, receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in support for materials and professional development. So we're going to continue to watch that. The state's initiative on high-quality instruction is very well funded. So it's possible we'll be able to continue to benefit from that.
With respect to capital, I think we have an understanding that there's some limitations in this area, and we plan to be very focused on what we bring to you this year. So there's a whole separate process for this. We are in the process of working on those, and I just kind of listed the dates that we'll be presenting those. We will present to the school committee before the November 20 date so that they typically will see it first. But we're looking at that for CPS. We'll also be looking at it for the regional school district.
I think for the CPS conference, it's obviously the elementary schools we're most reviewing for more priority needs.
Student enrollment and capacity. So there was a lot of information that we were asked there. What we shared was as much as we could and had available related to this. And we've shown you kind of here what the, just focusing on CPS, what the capacities are for the different buildings. And kind of further down, you can see the existing enrollment levels for 24-25. And it shows that there's space at CMS and the elementary schools to absorb some growth.
I think one thing to note, we have been reducing FTEs as enrollment has declined. But if that starts to shift the other way, we're going to have to come back and start adding them back. So part of the benefits we've had in bringing budgets to you is that the offsets of the reduction in force or the attrition, whichever way we've come to it, has allowed us to help mitigate some of the increases. If enrollments start going back the other way, that'll get harder to do, and we'll have to bring that conversation to you. Yeah, Don?
Yeah, I think that's why we asked
Yeah.
that question, and also because we noted in the last year's FinCom report that even despite declining enrollments, our spending was growing at the rate of inflation. So could we expect to see above inflation expenditures if enrollment increased? I think the answer you gave us is no. It's a very, very minimal impact. So which...
Yeah, so much of it depends, right? And I hate giving you that answer, but it does. If kids are spread out, so if we're talking about enrollment increases, and it works the same way the other direction, if all of the outgoing is in one grade level, I can cut a section, and I have. I don't have 4 sections at every school anymore, every grade at every school like we did for years. We're running 3 in many, many, many places. If it plays out that way, then there's a direct cost. If the kids are scattered, which is more typical, then it's smaller classes in certain places. It gets even more complicated when you put the matrix of the middle school and in a high school where the kids are moving around all day, because then they hit pieces of sections, and then you're talking about portions of teachers. we make those cuts. We do go to part-time when we don't have the need. But it just shows up in terms of fiscal outcome less. And I think the other part of what you're seeing is with the increased special education needs, it's offsetting some of the enrollment reductions because the in-house programs show that as salary costs. Now, you're mitigating millions of dollars in out-of-district costs by doing it. So we just have to make sure we're talking about all the buckets at the same time, which adds to the conversation.
So we did that analysis, and there's a lot of costs that are fixed, like the building principal, assistant principal, the custodial staff, the building maintenance, electricity, things like that are not going to vary with the number of students. So I listed what we saw, for an increase of 50 students, what we thought we might see. And that doesn't include, if there's a student that goes out of district. I listed what that might be. Our ratio is super small right now at CPS, knock on wood. But, the average, based on what we have right now, for every 133 students, one out of 133 students is out of district. If we had 50, maybe that wouldn't happen, but if we did, it would probably be around 155,000 in additional costs. And then I've outlined the other costs. At some point, potentially one classroom tips to another classroom teacher. With 50 students, we are going to have some students with special needs that might need a special education instructional assistant support. And there's some small amount of incremental costs for materials, like our software costs are often per school. Some of them are per student, but materials like in art or some other consumables in science, we'd have to spend a little bit more, but not a lot. So for the education reform and mandates, I referenced Title I. It's not really
Actually, just Bob, one question about the variable cost analysis, because you talked about an increase in 50 students. Is it relatively the same with a decrease in 50 students?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think we have a section that's going from 4 to 3 at Willard, most likely, and it's not 50. It's not a decrease of 50.
It's not a
but
perfect science,
when
yeah.
it tips from 4 to to the threshold of you can, we can reduce a teacher. We do. So we typically, I don't know what the number is, maybe 20 to students or less. There's not I don't know what the exact target is, but I know if you have 18 students per grade and 54 students, we're not going to have 4 sections. We're going to have 3.
Yeah.
It's so imprecise, in fact, that I actually closed a section after school opened this fall.
Yeah.
Because what we thought was coming, and the shelter was the swing. The shelter kids left, we thought some were filling in. We didn't know how many were still gonna be school of origin. And there were not enough kids in the classrooms, and I consolidated from 4 to 3 in the second week in September, which is not the way to do it.
Right.
But it didn't make sense to leave it the way it was. And we had a leave of absence, so I was able to slide that teacher over and keep her whole in that position. And, we did it mid-year, which, again, not my preferred mode, but, so we're looking at all that now so we can look forward to next year and do the zero-based. And I think you'll see when we bring it to you, we can show the declines from how many sections. It was 16 at every school and every grade across all 3, 16 4th grades, 5th grades, 3rd grades. And now we're averaging much more at 12 to 14. So you can see the decline, especially at the elementary schools. It stands up.
How many students did CPS lose from the closing of the shelter?
About 40.
40, thanks.
And they were all at Willard, pretty much. So that swung us into a little bit of a tailspin and where we were with staffing.
Okay.
Just partly because we did not know how many of them were going to have housing, so we were
Yep.
having to project things that were unpredictable.
I think 5 of them are,
Yeah,
maybe 5 or 6 are still, but they're in a different shelter, and they elected to continue in Concord,
Yep.
which is their right.
And that reduction is captured in the October, the chart?
In
That
terms
you
of
showed on the-
enrollments. Mhm.
Okay.
So they were enrolled, but they didn't show up on October 1?
No, they're in the enrollments from October 1st. The parts where we were unsure were like the August timeline when
Yeah.
we didn't have it all captured yet. Because literally, we didn't know where the children were for a while. Parents called and said, oh, we're here and we would like to stay in Concord. So,
Yeah, so there was 44 fewer students on October 1 than enrolled, I guess. October 1st in previous school year, I see, so it's a decline of 40.
Yeah, the numbers you have are the actuals.
Yep, yep,
We're just trying to tell you a little bit of the story
thank you.
that goes with
Yep.
it.
No, that's good.
Okay. We already talked about Title I. I don't know that we need to go through that again. Pension and OPEB is not in our budget. That's part of the regional budget. Well, for CPS, it's part of the town. I shared a lot of information on district tuitions. I'm just going to highlight a couple things. I think the primary takeaway I would have for CPS is you can see just the general fund savings, and a lot of this is through the build-out of our special education programs in terms of the bottom line dollars. The way we budget this is we determine the gross amount of tuitions, what are we actually going to get charged, and then we net what we anticipate receiving in circuit breaker funding, or what circuit breaker funding we can apply to offset it, and then the IDA special education grant. So that's why those three amounts there. And sometimes there's reasons why we decide to use a little bit more circuit breaker, a little bit more IDA. So there was a reason in FY23 we used less, and it's complicated and gets into the rules around how much money you can spend on special education. So, you know, FY23 and 24 combined for IDA equate to a typical year, but for compliance reasons, we need to spend it a little bit less in 23. So I think we're in a pretty good space relative to most districts in this area.
So one question about the IDEA. So that grant looked higher in FY '25. Is that the amount we should expect going higher than like 21 and 22? And you said 23 and 24 were a little strange.
Yeah, I had a
But-
little bit left over from 24 that I was able to carry into 25 because
Okay.
I had not used any in 23. I had used very little in 23. So in 24, I have a full year plus some of what's left from 23, but I didn't use all of 24 and 24. So these are not the actual funds that are awarded to us. This is how much we've spent.
Okay.
So by the end of 25, I used up all of the IDA funds. I'd say it's going to be closer to 550. And then they also take a portion of your grant and they assign it to private schools. And so we need to consult with them and they obtain a portion of our grant, a small portion.
Is IDEA a federal program?
Yeah, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a federal special.
And is there any risk in that?
So we wish we were sure. We're getting information from the state frequently right now, saying as of right now, everything's status quo. They are less, my takeaway and the information we've gotten in the last week especially, there seems to be less concern about the money as there is the processing and the lack of staffing that might be there to execute the funding and ensure that communities and states receive it. So there's a lot of unknowns right now in the process deliberation and how that's going to play out. And so we are not hearing big alarm bells that the funding itself is jeopardized. I think that would be catastrophic, frankly, to every community. But the processing certainly sounds like it's a little bit of a worry. And I still don't know, I mean, it's the same problem. I don't know how they could withhold or not execute the funding without it devastating local cities and the states that don't have the funds to keep us whole.
Yeah. As much as we get it, would be disastrous for
Yeah,
urban environments.
there are, the urban districts are running in big dollars that would devastate them, so.
Can you help us understand a little bit more how much discretion you have there and why that moves around? And
So when we're awarded a grant, we have 27 months to spend it. We typically would spend it in the same year, mostly just because it's cleaner and easier. Circuit breaker, you can carry over one full year of revenue. In the IDA grant, you can basically go into October of the third year, October 1st. The compliance piece is that when you get an IDA grant, you're required not to use that to supplant what you would spend from your budget. They call state and local funds. So state and local funds are basically, our budget's mostly from town tax levy and chapter 70. And
Yep.
so you look at, circuit breaker is considered state, it is state funds, so
Yep.
if we are shifting more of our special education costs to IDA to save money in our budget, there's rules
do
around
that.
that.
Okay.
It's a complicated calculation, but I have to do that every time in March to make sure we're not gonna get in trouble, so.
Okay.
And our best practice would be to spend the IDA grant in the year you receive it.
Okay.
And circuit breaker, ideally, carry over a full year and spend it the following year.
Okay. So you're kind of trying to extend it as long as you can, but also use it up to the extent you can in the current year, but then make sure it doesn't expire at the same time if you
Right.
have leftover.
Within the
Yeah,
rules of
within
how
the
you can-
rules.
yeah.
So applying it when you can, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of extra. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, fair, I understand, yeah, that's. So, there's information on placement costs, you can see they range, there's all sorts of ways they can vary. They could be a partial year, they could be split if there's a student that has parents who live apart in different towns, 50% of it. So that's why some of those numbers on the low end are as low as they are. But I would say a typical low-cost placement is 65,000 at a special education collaborative. That would be like the low side. And they can go as high as, you can see the high costs can be pretty high. They can be over 300,000. Related to this, we have been getting some notifications from some private schools of some increases in this area, but we only have 13 or 14 placements right now, so we'll kind of keep an eye on it and work it into our budget process. And then this is a roll forward on circuit breaker. So, you talked about how do we manage it. Like, you can see the revenue number. I tend to look at the ending balance as a percentage of revenue. Oops, excuse me, I scrolled too quickly. And I don't know what happened in FY21, it's not supposed to be higher, but in FY22, 23, 24, 25, you can see we're, I don't know, about 70%, 60-something percent of, a little bit high at the end of 25. So the idea would be, if I could, I would carry over 930,000 in FY25, but, we had some budget pressures and weren't able to do so. The guideline question we'll talk about in CCRSD, since it really didn't apply to
Sure.
CPS. And then the Ripley data, Dr. Hunter mentioned, applies to, I think, both districts, so
Yes.
we'll probably talk about this when Caroline is here.
Yep.
This is all Ripley
I'll say as
information.
many times as you want, we're not putting money into Ripley. We're gonna make it usable, and that is it. So, no major asks coming from us at the moment. And obviously, we're collaborating with the community on a big picture planning.
We did do a tour with the land use committee, but we certainly echoed, that sentiment. We're not planning to put money into it.
Oh, yeah.
So
Mhm.
the close of the shelter just highlights what we spent. All those positions have been eliminated, but they provided valuable support last year. There's information on.
I'm sorry, it's Peggy. Could you back up onto that table? What was the 8 million? For Ripley?
We're going to talk about Ripley when we talk about CCHS because it relates to both districts.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
we're
right.
gonna
You just
have,
said you weren't gonna put any money in it, I'm looking at 8 million, so.
Those are not asks, those are what the
Right.
review, the study we did said might be a way to address the building, but
Okay,
that's not what we're
Gotcha.
proposing.
okay.
We talked about the close of the shelter, and then I want to leave some time for the projections. I'm not doing the math in my head on how much time I have left, but,
I think you could go to that,
okay.
unless you have questions on the remainder of the document. We're gonna go to the 5-year projections, because I
Okay.
want you to
Oh.
have adequate time on that.
That's great.
I have some questions, but I think they apply as well for the regional school
Okay,
district, so
sounds
I'll
good.
save them
Yeah.
for then. For CPS in general, though, question, is the enrollment decline, I guess about half of the decline, a little less than half of the decline at CPS is from the shelter,
Yes.
but there were still something like 54
Yep.
students down from the prior year,
Yep.
aside from the shelter. Do we have an understanding of why that is?
You know, it's been in the projections the whole time that we were, as we worked with our NASDAQ consultants and some of the other groups, that there was, the census showed that there were fewer births,
Yeah,
and the projections didn't show any urgent housing starts.
Yeah.
So I think it's played out the way it looked on paper. I think we're getting, the shelter became a good example of one thing changing and things slip to a different direction. What we're trying to watch is, as we've adjusted for the decline, what, with the housing starts that are happening and the possible apartment complexes, I think there's good news there. We have space, and we can absorb a good number of children without exponentially increasing staff or other things. So that's, I think, very good news for the community. What we're trying to watch is, as those things come online, what will the impact be? And where will the staffing needs fall? Because it really is about staffing. You don't have a space issue right now. That's good news. So it's really about where the staffing needs will get tighter. And I think that it's trying to have a crystal ball to the things that aren't
Yeah.
quite real yet. I found the MCI work really, that consultant, very beneficial. They had a
Yep.
formula that they used,
Yes.
and then they worked with me to look at Nathan Pratt in that apartment complex, to look at our actual data, and they modified the formula based on the patterns we see in Concord. And I think that gave us a little bit more of a concrete projection. It's still obviously a projection, but I think it helped us see where we are and where we could be going.
So thanks for that. That projection shows about 120 students from the 40B projects.
Yeah.
And what, I think you've just answered the question, but I wanted to put that together against the natural decline we have.
Yep.
And I'm guessing that it'd be nice to see your tables, but
Yeah.
that it's about a wash. It'll probably keep us
That's what
relatively
I
stable.
think, so we'll try to put some things together to show you that. Yeah.
Okay, that would be great, because then I saw that you had that as one of your top concerns.
Yeah, we're watching it. We're as
So,
much
yeah.
attending to it as I know all of you are, because
Yeah.
it does feel like the big unknowns
Yeah.
that we can't, we
Yeah.
all have to work together on.
Yeah. And I see middle school went up by 13.
Yeah. a little
Is that
bit.
about what you expected from
Yeah,
the?
yeah, we thought the new building might draw
Right,
a little bit, and
right,
it did a little. So,
Okay.
yeah.
great, thanks.
All right, so
So we move-
before we move.
Lori, draw from where? For the increase in the school,
communities
fewer
or-
people sending their kids to private school?
It's and we haven't done this dive yet to look at it, but I think it's a combination of kids coming from other communities and a little bit from the private schools. But we'll do
Okay.
some analysis for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so before we move to CCRSD, we're actually going to, or
Not
you're
actually.
not moving there yet? Okay,
No.
good. All right, just
So
warn me
these are-
when you are, because we're
Yeah,
gonna,
There's 2 slides on CPS projections.
okay,
This is
great.
the climax.
Okay,
Where we show
great.
you the numbers.
Great.
I'm not going to go through these. I put these in
No,
every year
don't.
so you have our strategic plan and priorities, just in case you're wondering what they are.
Yep.
Yep.
This is the format we've come up with in prior years and we followed. We start with our overall district expenditures, and then we highlight other funding sources we have and deduct those from our expenditures to arrive at what we think the general fund impact will be. And we're estimating relatively flat grants this year, with Title I expecting to basically be flat, but the other grants to have their normal growth. Revolving funds, I anticipate a little bit of a tick up because we have the facilities rental revolving fund we created this year. It used to go to general fund revenue in the town, but that'll be a little bit of a pickup. But then after that, it'll be relatively moderate, similar amounts. Circuit breaker really depends on, once you get past a year, it depends on how many students are out of district. So I've projected some growth, but after year 2, it really becomes dependent on what the out-of-district tuition costs are. And we're hopeful that it stays steady like this, maybe just has growth that represents the cost of placement cost, inflation growth. So what we're looking at right now, we're anticipating is about a 3.5% increase. This is before we have done our budget. I just want to say that too. We've done some high-level analytics, but like as we do our budget, certainly things shake loose either one way or the other. In terms of the assumptions, for most of them, we're anticipating kind of moderate inflation. We looked at the teacher contract to estimate what the teacher increase would be. That we also have to factor in steps and lanes and net that with attrition and salary savings. We had, not necessarily attrition, but retirement savings for staff who retire. These assumptions are, based essentially on level staffing too. If we determine that we have a position that we might reduce, it potentially could be less. The supplies and materials out after year 2 is a little bit less uncertain. We're moving forward with the ELA curriculum implementation in 26 and 27. It's a 2-year implementation. We anticipate a similar cost next year, fiscal year, as we do this year. If we look at other subject matters, social studies, science, those probably wouldn't be that expensive, but something like math could be substantial. So I'd say FY 28, 29, 30 for supplies, materials will remain to be seen. Tuitions, we do have one slight uptick in that for FY 27 that we're aware of, but overall, still, I think, we're happy that our first pass came out at 3.5. And again, this is before we go through the detailed budget development exercise. So, I don't know if there's any questions on it.
Yeah, just briefly, glad you'll be back. There were several places, I think, where we asked for some additional data, or we asked for some of the same data on a per-student basis, and this is one of them. And I wonder if you could have that in your next presentation. So question, I could point to where in the letter, 1.2, 6.3, it's 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6. Those were areas that we didn't get addressed in this response.
Okay, I'll make a note. 6.3 through 6.6.
Yeah, thanks.
Should we get that per student data without the out of district? I think that would be more relevant.
I don't think we asked for that, Peggy.
Okay,
Could look at it both ways, maybe.
yeah. Okay.
My only caution, we will just want to label things, because the state puts out per pupil with the way they do the formula, which is typically what we try to defer to, so that it all stays consistent. So if we have specific asks, we'll just want to all be sure we label them and factor that in.
And I guess if you did do, as Peggy's asking about, without the out-of-district, you'd also have to take out circuit breaker and IDA, the other offsets.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can take these numbers and just for each category, come up with a per student number. And again, but Dr. Hunter made the point, like, the state number, there's a certain category of expense they include from the state per pupil expenditure, and I don't remember exactly why that is, but if I do it, I would probably just want to use these numbers and just have everybody be aware that if the DESI number is a little bit different, it's not going to be very different, that I'm going to use the October 1 enrollments for each of these years. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll also lose the comparisons across other districts.
Yeah, I don't know if that's one of the questions, I guess, because we, as a town, we put all of the overhead, the retirement account, OPEB, et cetera, for this, and health insurance, for the schools in the town together into one
Right.
budget line. So
Right.
we don't really have a feeling of the overall CPS cost per pupil, because that isn't part of the overall picture. So that's one thing we're trying to see is, we have it for the high school, we just
Yeah.
don't have it for the CPS.
Well, we have to report some of that in the end.
End of your report.
Yeah, it's in the DESI numbers. They have to include the data from the town side.
Well, if you could put it in
Yeah, so,
your response, that'd be great.
yeah,
Thanks.
we'll flesh it out for you,
Thank you.
or at least explain it.
I went to this, I tried to
Yeah.
sort it out, and no,
It sounds like a simple question, and
Yeah.
there's just a lot of
Yeah,
detail
yeah,
and
yeah.
moving pieces.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a section of the end of your report that's called town paid costs, and we get that
Yeah,
from the
we have to
town,
have that.
Yeah,
town
okay.
accountant.
Mhm.
I think not sure how easily separated. I'll ask, well, we'll certainly ask for the data. We can use what's presented, and it is, I'll just qualify it that in terms of how they split it out, I don't know that they necessarily do detailed tracking. I think they come up with the number analytically.
Uh-huh.
But it'll be an indicator.
Thank you.
Any other questions about CPS? And Bob, is that all you have for CPS specifically?
Yes.
Okay, so we can, so what we're going to be doing is adjourning the Concord Finance Committee meeting and calling to order a joint meeting of Carlisle and Concord, if we have everyone.
Yeah, we can move down and make room.
Yeah. So, let's adjourn first,
motion.
right? We need a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn first.
A move to adjourn this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee.
I second.
Okay, great, we have a second. So
All in
adjourn.
favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, adjourn. Okay, and then we'll make some room, and then we'll call everything to order.
How many do we have? Are the Carlisle folks here?
I saw a couple of, yeah, here we are. We're gonna make some room. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
Perfect time.
We're gonna make some room for you.
There's only two of us in person, so.
Oh, okay. Oh, so we can just make, yeah, we'll make room here and here. Come up to the table, though.
Grab some chairs.
Good. We'll share this mic, okay?
Sure.
Do you have some members online, too?
Yes, so we have a total of 7, so we do have a quorum. We have 2 with conflicts, 2 online, so we're good.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll call everything to order, and then we can make sure we all, welcome you and say introductions, okay? All right, so I think we're ready to call to order a joint meeting of the Carlisle and Concord Finance Committees. So,
I will do
now
the
we'll do a roll call for
roll call for the
Concord.
Concord side.
Okay.
Peggy Briggs,
Present.
Brian Conway,
Present.
Kathy Cupola,
Here.
Eric Dahlberg,
Present.
John Garofalo,
Here.
Pat Geyer, here. Don Kupka,
Here.
Lindsay Liss,
Here.
Paul Rodriguez,
Here.
Shri Tupel, and Lois Swathoff.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum too.
All right, great. I would like to call the Carlisle joint meeting of the FinCom to order. So let's start with the roll call. Capaccio here.
Lilliman here.
Liang here.
Schulberg here.
And we're open. Thank you.
Well, welcome. I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Likewise.
Can you say your names one more time?
I'm Heidi Schoberg.
Heidi.
James Cataccio, and I'm the chair.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Victor Liang.
Oh, there's Victor, okay. We have
And
Victor.
Craig Lilman.
Hi, Craig. All right, great. Well, we were really happy with the collaboration that we were able to achieve last year with aligning on the guideline, and we appreciate you guys coming here to Concord for this meeting. So thank you again, and hopefully it means we're all getting the same message from the schools, and we're all can hear each other's questions. So I think it really is valuable. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, get started. Sure.
Just before you jump in, just so Carlisle hears, these are mostly this is historical information with some projections without us having built the budget yet. So we're in the process now and did the best we could to look forward without having gone deep into the details. So first pass. So we'll let Bob get started.
So we prepared a response to the questions that were raised through the guidelines process. I will kind of skip the repetitive parts. We run a just for Carla, we run a zero-based budget process. We don't roll things forward year to year. We identify specific needs and have specific lines for everything in the budget, do personnel position by position. That's a core part of our process. I'll go through the projections at the end. That's a separate presentation. Spending level changes in terms of kind of macro level view of what those would be. I think with the building getting a little bit older, that's the one area that kind of jumps to mind. Building maintenance costs, the HVAC equipment on the roof is large and relatively expensive. We had to replace one unit for $40,000 a year or two ago, and some of those are going to be near end of life. We might be able to absorb some of those within the operating budget. Some of them may be capital, but that's an area we're going to keep an eye on. We'll try to be proactive, and certainly we do preventative maintenance to minimize expenses in this area and get as much life as we can out of these units. But again, the building's getting a little older, and something we're going to have to keep monitoring. As far as the FY25 year-end update, let me just click on the link, go to that report. So I'll go through the general fund just at a high level to start. The overall budget was $39,374,907. We spent all of it except for $6,607 at the end of the year. You might recall too, we had an additional $400,000 authorized by the school committee during FY25, and that was through E&D. That's not an additional appropriation assessment to the towns. The school committee voted and we notified the towns that we wanted to access $400,000 and put it to the capital stabilization account. That potentially could be used for multiple purposes, and we'll talk about that later. Excess and deficiency, the update I have, we haven't certified yet for this year. This, for those who aren't familiar with it, is the regional school district's equivalent of a municipality's free cash. The rules are a little bit different, and we have a lower limit than you have for free cash, but essentially this is our free cash. We're allowed to carry up to 5% of an E&D balance, 5% of our operating plus capital budget. We ended the year, ended FY24 at a little over 1.6 million, or 4.1% of the FY25 budget. So we have capacity 0.9 to potentially grow. And then beyond that, we would need to turn over any excess to the towns. State and federal grants, we receive a fair number, and I'm going to just highlight those here. About 1.1 million for the high school. It's the second column on this page. The most substantial and large grants are the same here as they are for Concord Public Schools, the IDA Special Education Grant and the MECCO grant. The ones highlighted in that pinkish color are competitive grants. We're not necessarily going to get those every year. The remainder of the grants are entitlement grants that we typically do get every year. The last one at the bottom is specifically related to us having a shelter, which that will go away in FY27. Title I, there's some risk of that 27th, but you can see the amount's pretty small at CCRSD. So if we were to lose, federal government gave some guidance that might be cut by 15 to 20%. 20% of 27,000 is 5,000, so 5 to 10,000 potentially at risk for Title I. We don't have, the news we're getting about the other grants is a little bit less, it's a little bit more optimistic. So we're not anticipating any changes to that at this point. Another funding source for our regional school district is the revolving funds. And I highlighted the kind of the major revolving funds that we have here. Adult and community ed program, you can see where that ended. That's essentially a self-sustaining program. Athletics had a slight increase this year. We charge fees, and most of the expenses are supplies, referees, things like that. The school lunch fund had a slight decline this year. A little bit less participation, a little bit of a change in the Wednesday schedule. That's something we're going to look at and see if we can shore up that in FY26. Circuit breaker grew. There was a lot of, that's in part because of the growth in out-of-district tuitions, so we're getting reimbursed more. We ended the year with a healthy balance. We'll be utilizing some of that this year. When we had, and we budgeted to use a little bit more this year, knowing that we had we have challenges this year in FY26. Facilities for rental is a new revolving fund as of 2 or 3 years ago, and I left a small balance in there this year. We had spent it down in full the previous year. We had a little bit more rental income this year, and this serves as a little bit of a buffer in case we have a known issue in the building that we need to repair that we can't cover from the operating budget. So we have pretty good use of our facilities from outside parties during the summer for camps. And this is a good revenue source for us that doesn't detract from our facilities. They don't. It helps offset some of our operating costs. The non-resident tuition has grown. We have special education programs that students from other towns attend, and we charge right now $45,000 per student. I think that is 5, 6, that's four students. There's some students that didn't attend the full year. That's why it's an odd number. This helps defray some of the costs of our special education programs. And if we had, we're actually looking at increasing the cost. School committee proposed a slight increase for next year, but it is provide us some relief in the special education area when we have some cost pressures there to help absorb some of that. It also gives our students a larger cohort group. If our cohorts are small, it gives them a better peer group in our programs. So we have.
Excuse me, Bob. Just a question going back to the circuit breaker. Just something I didn't ask previously. When do you find out what the reimbursement rate is going to be for transportation costs? Because it sounds like you found it kind of late in this last fiscal year, or is it always kind of?
So they issued us guidance already this year.
Okay.
So our reimbursement this year, we'll get in 4 separate payments over the 4 quarters. They issue initial guidance, and they told us they're going to reimburse 75% of tuition. I don't remember what the number was for transportation, but it was not 75%.
Okay.
What I'm spending this year is I had an idea of what we were going to get this year. I'm going to spend basically last year's balance and some of the current year circuit breaker revenue. Because if you don't have any carryover, you could potentially have they could cut circuit breaker, and if I factor that into my budget process and that revenue were to go away, then I'm stuck with a large number that I can't absorb otherwise.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, you mentioned that there are 4 students from other districts that are coming here, and are they full-time students here?
We're up to 8 this fall.
Up to 8, and because that 45,000 is lower than any of our out-of-district placement costs, right? The lower than the low end of the costs that we incur. Are we at least covering our costs in that case?
Absolutely. And if the child needs a one-to-one, a specific individual staff member, the other district is paying on top of the 45,000. So we are covering costs for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
We have, yep, no added teachers, no added tutors.
And if it's gonna tip that, we decline the request, so.
One thing that's driving the increase too is the retail space we have for the launch program at 211. I mean, our annual lease is $37,000. I think we have 2 students in that from the launch program now, so they paid for the
You're
lease.
covering the lease.
Yeah.
I mean, to put it in financial terms, anyway.
And they're selling really great stuff if you want to stop by and have them wait on you at the store, yes.
So that surprise of the increase, I'm just highlighting on the circuit breaker, the transportation number that they communicated to us for the reimbursement of circuit breaker, the initial number was like 50%, 50-something percent. When it went to 75, the impact for CCRSD was an additional $135,000 in circuit breaker. So
So those 2 areas especially, there's an ongoing lobby going on from the Superintendent's Association, the school committee. So the legislators never stop hearing that. So if they get to the later part of a fiscal year and there's some funds, it is not uncommon that they will rally in that last round of the budget for that fiscal year to move some money over to that. We're always going to keep lobbying to have them put it in at the beginning and really bake it in, but at least there's some acknowledgement that those needs are very significant to districts, so.
this is the status of the OPEB fund. This is as of June 30, 2024. Through the OPEB audit. We also had investment earnings in FY25 of a little over 1.3 million. So we have $11.7 million in our OPEB trust. Last year we forewent, we're in a healthy position. Last year we decided to forego the contribution and instead use that to cover the unbudgeted out-of-district tuition costs. When you see the summary of the FY25 year end, you'll understand that. Grants we covered. And then this is the year-end summary. It's a little bit small, but so the second column, second financial column, transfers and adjustments, is what the school committee approves for us to move money between different budget lines. If you go down to the bottom of the report, the out-of-district tuitions, you can see the $823,000. Some of that is, a small portion of that is school choice and charter schools and a hospital placement, those being slightly above budget. But the vast majority, almost, I'd say it's over 700,000 of the 823 is out-of-district tuitions. And that's why we raised that. We saw that pretty early in the year. That's why we repurposed the OPEB contribution last year, so that we didn't have to ask for an increased assessment. And that's why we made some decisions in other areas to identify savings. We had within the administration, we had a retirement of a tech specialist at the high school that we didn't replace during the year. That was contributing to that $127,000 reduction on the top line. In the instructional area, we had a variety of factors. We had some replacement hire savings. We had one of the special ed teachers transfer from the high school to CCHS, from CCHS to CPS, and didn't fill it. We had some reductions in sped tutors. The non-resident tuitions that I mentioned serve as kind of a credit to costs in that instructional leadership category. They're offsetting special education instructional costs. So we had a lot of moving parts there to help offset the tuitions being over budget. The fixed asset number is a positive number because of the vote to authorize $400,000 in E&D that went to the line 7,000. That's where the capital stabilization contribution shows up. Otherwise, we would have been a little bit under budget on fixed assets because of our bus lease costs. Our vendor's been a little bit slow to deliver some of the buses, so our lease costs were less than anticipated. So that's really the tuition situation drove our activities last year. And that's where we ended the year. In terms of FY '26, we don't see these same pressures. We have, the out-of-district tuitions were factored into our budget. We're on budget.
Just a huge amount of gratitude for your willingness to have those conversations with us. It's the first time we've opened a budget without being in deficit in 3 years. So we're sleeping a little better, which we appreciate your support.
The top issues are always going to be, the first one is always going to be maintaining high-quality special education in-district programs. It's good for our students. It's also good for our budget. It tends to benefit both. Enrollment projections is an area that we feel like we need to focus more on, especially with uncertainty on housing developments and what their impact's going to be. And I know that there's a couple in Concord. I think there's one in Carlisle that's being considered. So getting a little bit more information on those and what the timing is and trying to figure out what the impact will be important.
Can I just add to that? And Carlisle, I think, knows some of this. The shift has swung considerably to Carlisle this year because Concord's down 40 students at the high school and Carlisle's up 20. These are rough numbers, but up 20. And they're facing a really significant challenge for FY '27. So it seems we feel really strongly we want to be part of projecting and watching and analyzing all the data as far ahead as we possibly can and making sure those numbers stay really relevant and front and center to everyone, because when it swings that way, it's going to swing back. And because our regional agreement does it on an annual basis, it's just built for the swings. And so the more we can all see them or predict them or study them, it'll be helpful to the communities.
Yeah, and to build a little bit more detail into it, like there's variables. So like the number of students that decide to attend private schools, the number of students that decide to attend a vocational school. Carla's not a member of Minuteman, but Concord students, if there's more going into the Minuteman school, I don't know what Minuteman's capacity is. So and then the private school enrollment, does it shift that, we have an attractive, nice new middle school? Do we have more people come in? Do the housing developments, what impact do they have? So there's a lot of moving parts. And I think we're going to see if we can figure out ways to quantify some of the pieces and at least share what we estimate. And maybe as we do this multiple years, we can at least point back to, okay, our assumptions about private school enrollment are a little bit off. Maybe we need to change those. But so it's a top issue, I think, in terms of how things are split between the two towns for the region. I think we have capacity to manage the overall student enrollment.
Bob, just pause for a second. We do have a question from Peggy Briggs, who's a Concord.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Member.
This has been an issue for, 30 or 40 years. And I'm just wondering if it might be a good time to, put up a committee and start talking a little bit more seriously about a rolling average of 3 or 5 years, starting in the future, not right away, to ameliorate these kind of impacts. And, Concord, frankly, I think has the capacity to absorb it, but it's pretty tough on Carlisle when these kind of numbers go up. So I just put that out there. Nothing like a committee, not deciding this year, but, move toward a rolling average. Thanks.
Just, we can't comment on that from whether it's good or not. What we can do, we can certainly help model that. Both Dr. Hunter and I have been in districts that have had rolling averages.
You notice we didn't bring it up. That's for you all to figure out if you want to go there, but we can help
no.
We can help
It's a hot
inform you, yes, for sure.
We're certainly would be able to figure out the numbers and examples of types of agreements that have it, but that's for both towns to decide.
And it's just it's a big process. You're opening the regional agreement, and it would take votes in both communities.
I guess one thing you could help us with a lot is raising the flag as far in advance as you can
Yes.
based on the DESI
Yes.
enrollments. I don't recall having this conversation
Yep.
last year with Carlisle, but maybe, were you expecting a big?
No.
No.
Not to this
So,
degree.
Yeah, so nobody wants to be in that position, as you
Yep.
can understand. And I think when we look at these enrollment numbers and then we say, were we expecting that? I think the answer usually is, well, it was in DESI and you could, but if you could make it a little simpler for us, we're
Agreed.
pretty simple
Yep.
people. By pulling that forward and saying, here's what we see coming
Yep.
down the road, right? As we asked for in the letter as well.
Yep.
So then we can make projections. And also we can see where we are relative to where we thought we would be. That would be usually
Yeah, we
helpful in our
totally
planning.
agree.
Yeah.
We had been modeling it, and it turns out the model we had didn't hold. So there's a lesson, we've got to go back and dig deeper into
Yeah.
why that is, and I think look at it more frequently. So we completely agree with you.
Yeah, thanks. That does get to I think the question it would raise if we had the model and we saw it, we'd wonder, why are people choosing not to send their children to the school? Are we seeing a larger percentage of people going to private schools? I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's the
Today, we don't know.
data we haven't dug into yet.
Okay.
We know the enrollment's down. We don't know if it's just a matter of who happens to live in the community and there's not as many high school students, or is it they're making other choices?
Yeah,
And we need to dig into that for you.
right.
We agree.
Otherwise, we only have anecdotal,
Yeah.
which is not helpful.
We did see the decline overall enrollment coming because the enrollments were down, at least more in Concord than Carlisle, because yours has actually been pretty stable the last number of years. But I think there's depth to that, to your point. There's a lot of nuance.
And I would just add too, like, it might not be simple, but like, it'll be easy to understand. There's like, put in all the data elements and then you can decide, like, when you see it, well, I don't really think the private school's gonna go down that much, or, if we have it and it's transparent and you can see all the
Yeah.
inputs and outputs, we can all see what happens after a year and then say, okay, our assumptions are off this year. You're gonna have some variability, but at least it's a little bit more understandable why it happened after the fact.
Right, thanks.
Go ahead, Eric.
Do you have, I couldn't find in the packet, do you have a chart comparable to what you provided for CPS showing the high school's enrollment in absolute numbers and then broken out for Concord and Carlisle over time? I see percentages in the slides, but I don't see
Yeah, we can
what would
create
be
that.
really clear would just be
Yeah.
the numbers over
Yeah,
the
we have
last
that,
5
so
years.
It's just all putting it in one place. We
Okay.
can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one that I created was
Historical.
a forward-looking one.
Yeah, we can go backwards.
Yeah, I think between the various questions in the letter, we were trying to look both,
Yeah.
since 2020 to now, and then looking
Yeah.
forward 5
Yeah.
years as well. Thanks.
No problem.
The capital process will be working towards the November 20th meeting, and, we'll talk more about that. I think that's, I don't know in Carlisle when we have that meeting. The only thing we see on our radar kind of down the line eventually is replacement of Memorial Field, maybe 3 years out. The discussion of the amenities building we brought to CPC. There was discussion of potentially a track, but that was going to be fundraised for. We would kind of note that if that's in our capital plan, that's going to be a fundraising project. The only other thing is there's probably some building-related needs as the building gets to be a little bit older. And, to the extent that we think we can absorb them in the operating budget, we will. As we go out further in the plan, we might want to think about like some of the things that are going to need to be replaced and whether to consider them large enough to be capital or not. But we'll be working on that in the coming month. We don't anticipate a lot for capital in the next 5 years for CCHS. Student enrollment, it's just our stated enrollments, 1,225.
Mhm.
And our current enrollment's a little bit below that. We went through a variable cost analysis exercise. The question was, what happens if we have more enrollment? At the high school, we don't necessarily, and when we see changes in enrollment, this can happen even just switching between math and social studies. We might cut a quarter section. One section equates to a quarter FTE. We could have shifts between subjects just based on the class courses students pick. When there is cuts, it tends to be at a quarter FTE level. Could be quarter, could be half, but we went through the exercise of if we had a reduction, an increase in 25 CCH students, what might it mean in terms of costs? And this was to the larger question of,
Yep.
you know, we've had some enrollment declines. What happens if we have a shift the other way? And so we went through that analysis, and for increase in 25 Concord Carlisle High School students, we estimated maybe a quarter of a classroom teacher, so 25,000, quarter of a special education tutor, or 11,000, and then about $200 per student for instructional materials, so 5,000. So that would be about 41,000 on a budget, our base budget of 40.4 million, so about a 0.1% increase for 25 students. Again, this is all theoretical, you know, if one student goes out of district, or maybe none of these costs need to be added, but this is kind of an estimate of what we think we might see, what the sensitivity would be. It'd probably be a breaking point of about 25 students. I've also shared the cost of an out-of-district placement in the event that we had one of those.
Kathy has a question.
Yeah, my question is, it's good to see these projections, but you can't hire a quarter of a teacher.
Oh, we do, yeah. We have people who work less than full-time.
Okay.
We adjust, every year we adjust. And actually, we have a number of people at the high school who prefer to be part-time. It works for their family lives.
All right.
So, yeah, we do.
So they could go from 0.5 to 0.75, or
Yeah.
0.75 to 1 in this case.
Yep.
Um,
Another question.
You have a new initiative on the AP front. How do you think that plays in here? Do you think it's shifting teachers, adding?
It's just changing what they're teaching, so
Okay.
it won't impact FTE counts at all.
Great.
Yeah, we're excited about that, and we have actually people who taught APs in other districts, and they're gonna be able to do it without any training, some of them. So it's still in our
Sure, it's a
conceptual
work in
development
progress.
process, but it looks like we'll just be switching who's doing
But from a
what.
numbers perspective, you
Yeah,
feel great?
No change.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
And how many Metco students did we lose at the high school?
I don't have the numbers right in front of me. We're averaging about 35. That's a ballpark off the top of my head. Metco students at the high school right now. We have 120 district-wide.
We haven't lost their.
Yeah, it's pretty stable. It's down from what it was, but it's fairly stable at around that 120 mark.
Okay. And then, do you know how many we lost from the shelter closing?
Under 5. It was much fewer at the high school.
Thank you.
And one of those is coming from another shelter. They've relocated and still coming back to the high school. Education reform, I already talked about Title I, so I'm not going to talk about that again. Pension and OPEB, I shared in our year-end report the OPEB trust balance. Pension, we get assessed from the Concord Retirement Board. It's built into our operating budget, so we don't have a liability there. We just get an assessment. I think we're, you know, as we get out into 2030, we're going to get some relief because the Concord Pension Fund is pretty well funded.
Yes.
But we'll wait for that number to decline. I've shared out-of-district historical information. You can see it's not the same picture as CPS. We had that spike last year, which really drove the number in FY25. But we anticipate that as we move forward into 26 and 27, that we'll have some stability in 26 and a significant decline in FY27. You can see the range of costs is varies significantly. Those low ranges, which, as I said before, include some partial years and includes when there's parents in 2 separate towns living apart, that the cost is split between the communities. The high end, 311,000, might be the New England Center for Children, I don't know. But there's some high-cost placements there too, yeah. And then there's historical data on what we've carried over for circuit breaker, our balances, our revenue. I'm not gonna go through that in detail unless there's any questions. So in terms of the question about, is it helpful to include this or not include it in guideline? We do a zero-based budget. Whether it's in guideline or not, we're not gonna take the savings and plug it somewhere else, so we commit to not do that.
Good.
So
My big picture question here is why are there so many more out-of-district placements at the high school than in CPS?
Yeah, so it's multi-tiered. One is that we didn't have all our in-house programming in place at K-8 in the Concord schools when those kids were little. So sometimes when they go out, even if we have the program, it's very hard to return them. So some of it's the cascade of if a child went out when they were younger, we didn't bring them back, and we just have less going out now at CPS. Carlisle had a little bit of uptick that we inherited at grade 9. And we're working to build a collaboration to make sure that we're all staying on the same page, because the region inherits whatever decisions get made over there. And I know we're making progress there. And we just had acute needs, a combination of move-ins, students going into mental health crisis. It was a variety of things. So it just kind of all came at one time. So I think too, because of the level of need, students weren't graduating at 12th grade. They were staying in until they're 22. So often in my early first 5 years or so, we had about the equal number of students coming into grade 9 as we're exiting. And we lost that pace because many students are staying till they were 22 and staying with us for 6 years in the region instead of 4, and the ins and outs just weren't the same. We're getting back to some change in that. So this coming FY27, we can see over 10 kids aging out or graduating, and that is not going to be backfilled at that rate. So we're able to bring you a much different projection here this year. So it was a combination of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it normal that you might see people go to out-of-district placement when they enter the high school, at high school age?
Not, well, and again, it depends. When they're with us K-8,
Yeah.
it isn't all that common because we've done other things. The piece we're really working on is Carlisle, because we don't know the family and they don't know us and the services. We're trying to build that communication down at the middle school level in Carlisle, so the information's shared a little bit more broadly and differently. So that's a piece of it.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
because it's a percentage of Concord students, let's say, or of total student body, it's a higher percentage.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And just in a level of, the overall level of need was just extraordinary those last few years at the high school level.
Okay.
So we're all exhaling, seeing that the decline is coming, and seeing the pipeline from both communities isn't as rich and robust. Doesn't mean people won't move in or something won't change, but we can see that the trend should be back towards the numbers we had or even less.
Thanks.
The CPS number is an anomaly. It's not, we're well below the state average in terms of the percent of students out of district. The high school is around the average,
Yeah.
and but as Dr. Hunter mentioned, now we have like the same programs K to 12, so you can go from the same program, we all have the same names now, and so we're hoping that this year is kind of the beginning of a trend.
Yep.
So in terms of debt service, the way we borrow is level principal payments, which means as principal's paid down, that the interest payment declines. So that's why our debt service you see here. There is one, we had some bans, which is on the bottom line. There was some remediation to the landfill before I was here. I don't know when that relates
Well, I was
to.
here.
Okay.
2018.
So that's being paid off this year, and or was already paid off this year, and I've projected us paying off the access road, which we borrowed for a couple of years ago, over FY27 through FY30, and we would be paid off in FY31. The bottom line, that line is the only one that could be altered. The rest of those are, with a band, you have a required principal pay down. You get to pay the interest, and the required principal pay down is not that significant. So if somebody asked us, could we reduce the debt service, we could reduce the ban for the access road in FY '27. The others are kind of fixed in our payment terms. But you can see it's a pretty healthy decline over the years, going from 3.7 to a little bit, 3.058 in FY '31. We were asked for information on the Ripley building, and so, as we said earlier, our position is we're going to do only what's absolutely necessary to maintain the building and be smart about it. We've listed kind of all the space that's there now, and that's information we shared with the Concord Land Use Committee. All the space and FTEs in this space. In terms of the operating cost, I've shared that information here. These are estimates. I'm not getting into like, you know, what portion of the labor of our maintenance staff relates to Ripley. I mean, there's some, like, I don't know how to quantify that, but there's not enough for us to cut a maintenance position by not having Ripley. So snow blowing, lawn mowing. We do some preventative maintenance. We have custodial supplies. We do have one full-time custodian. So those are the costs related to the building. So when it comes to capital for Ripley, so we did a study of all of our Concord buildings, which includes the 3 elementaries in Ripley. We did not do the middle school because we have a new building. We didn't need to look at a capital plan for that. And the consultants had a lot of recommendations. Some of these are recommendations, some of these are, we really think you should do, some of these are, it'd be nice if you did this, it'd be more functional space. All those nice things that they think we should maybe think about are things where, in our view, like, I don't know that it's worth doing to sustain a building that's 60-plus years old. So this is what the consultants had for their projections. This is not what we're going to bring forward. You know, in the HVAC category, you'll see 299,000. We did actually prioritize about 15 to 20,000 last year. That was critical for our server room. You know, we have $500,000 worth of IT equipment, so that was something we felt was critical to have better cooling in there. Some of the site work, that's something you know, you'll see 8,000. That's stuff we can cover out of our operating budget. Some of these things we felt like we weren't operating. When you get out into future years, you know, architectural, like roof, we're gonna look at patching when we need to patch. Roof replacement makes sense. Even if we were to decide, you know, there would be a lot of people involved in decide we wanted to do something significant in Ripley, we would probably want to pursue CFMSBA funding as an option. But again, I wanted to share what the consultant's report was. When we bring forward our capital plan, we're only going to include items that we think are necessary at Ripley. And you know, a lot of this, we've also had our facilities manager look at some of these, say, for example, and say, you know, some of these plumbing costs, you know, we have an in-house plumber now in our maintenance team. You know, we don't need to pay somebody to do some of these things. We can do this ourselves and just buy the equipment. You know, the boilers are old, but they work. They work. You know, they're not necessarily the most efficient, but replacing those, you'd have to deal with asbestos mitigation. And so it's not just replacing the boilers, and that makes it a less palatable option. So that's the information we have on Ripley.
Can I ask some questions on Ripley? Before so it's always been a mystery to me where the Ripley cost appears in the budget. Is it in the CCRSD joint budget? Is it in the CPS budget?
60% CPS, and the operating costs are 60% CPS.
Okay.
40% the region.
And some of this is education expense. It's actual classrooms and instruction. Is that part of CPS?
The
preschool.
Yeah, the
preschool.
preschool's in the CPS
It's in the
budget.
CPS,
Yeah.
okay. And I'm sure you've looked at this, but could that be done in one of the elementary schools?
we have looked at it. There isn't space in the elementary schools. We're up to 5 preschool classrooms plus the service providers, which is another 3 to 4 classrooms. So, and you've got the data there to see how that all plays out. So it's significant, it's small, but significant enough, we can't just move them. And we get cost efficiencies and service efficiencies because they're all together.
Together, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are about 35 FTEs listed that I think would comprise the administration, right, in your list here, from about halfway down, starting with HR and on down. Is
Can I
that,
just qualify that? You should exclude case, because they are leases at
Ah.
Ripley,
okay,
case administration,
so it's about 29.
yeah.
And are they all full-time in Ripley, or do they actually have offices and things inside the schools?
Yeah, so anyone who's got an office at Ripley doesn't have an office anywhere else.
Oh,
That doesn't
really?
mean I'm sitting in my office all day, obviously.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
out in the schools a lot of the time. Any of the support staff is there all day, 8 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know, thanks. Even, there's 4 special ed student services FTEs there,
Yeah.
there in
they're-
Ripley?
That's for the integrated school, right?
Well, it's the sped director and her assistant sped director, and then 2 admin assistants.
I see. Thanks.
You're welcome.
The close of the shelter, the vast majority of students at the shelter are K to 8, mostly K and 1 in preschool. There was a small number of 5 or so students at the high school. We did incur some transportation costs, $60,000. We'll get reimbursed, and that'll come into general fund revenue next year, FY '26. We did get some grant funding that helped offset some tutor costs. So with the shelter closing, those revenues will go away. We've also included information on our legal settlements there. And the last information are just supplements at the end, strategic priorities, and our, just share a circuit breaker calculation, because I usually get a lot of questions on what it is and how's it calculated, so that's just in there as a reference. If there's no questions, I think I'll jump to the assessments presentation, projections.
I'm sure you saw that Brian and Tracy are here from the school committee. They're behind me, so I keep forgetting, but.
Jump through and skip ahead to the Concord Carlisle section. So our traditional, at least for the last 3 or 4 years of presenting this, is to develop an all funds expenditure estimate projection, and then identify and deduct funding sources we have that support some of those expenses, grants, revolving funds, and circuit breaker, to come at what our general fund budget would be. And then for revenue sources, general fund revenue, those basically offset the budget to arrive at what the net assessment is to the 2 towns. So just using 26 as an example, our overall budget was $45.2 million. We're looking at revenues of about $4.8 million, and our general fund budget is $40.4 million. We have these revenues that get applied to cover a portion of the budget. You can see we don't really get, we're a wealthy community, both Carlisle and Concord, and so we don't get a lot of Chapter 70 money. This number would be at, like, Worcester and Springfield, this number would be $30 million based on our budget. So we subtract revenue sources too. That's how we arrive at what we assess to the 2 towns, and that's assessed based on relative enrollment. What we're projecting for next year is about a 2.2% increase in expenditure growth. We're expecting flat grant revenue. The Title I grant will probably be a slight decline, but IDA grant will So the grant revenue will be relatively flat. Revolving fund revenue, there'll be some modest growth. Circuit breaker, we're anticipating a large increase, and we are using that to offset our assessments in both 27 and 28. Doing it in this way helps us buffer. We're going to have a significant drop-off in circuit breaker revenue realized in 28 because our tuitions are dropping off, and you can use circuit breaker over 2 years, so we're smoothing that out to help. So with that circuit breaker revenue, the general fund increase is 1.6%, and I'll show on the next page kind of what the different categories are. We are seeing a little bit of a bump in Chapter 70 revenue this year. The rest of the revenues we're projecting to be relatively flat. So the net assessment towns is a little bit less than the general fund increase. It would be 1.5% instead of 1.6. Future years, we're looking at different figures here, a little bit more the norm, 3%, 3.3, 2.8, 2.4 as we look at multiple years. We've also been asked to, when we share our assessments, to share it excluding debt. So we've done that here, and you can see our general fund increase in FY27 would be 2.1 if we don't factor in that debt service reduction. These are the main drivers, and so we broke it out into the kind of the key expense categories. I guess the one I would call attention to that's really driving the overall increase is the out-of-district tuition. So instead of a large increase, it's minus 6% in the FY27 column for out-of-district tuitions. And that's factoring in that we're going to have some rate increases, but we're going to have about 10 students graduating or aging out. We'll have a couple moving up from 8th grade across Concord and Carlisle in the middle schools. So that's really what's driving the overall increase. It's a low number, 2.1 without the debt assessment, 1.5 without. You can see the other piece at the bottom is the debt assessment. We're anticipating the rest of the expense categories to have relatively modest and moderate growth. So, we are comfortable that in terms of where we are now, the 1.5 and the 2.1, excluding the debt, are what makes sense. The only pressure that kind of recently came up was the insurance category. I did estimate 8%, which I thought was high and conservative, but I'm hearing chatter about the Maya rates potentially being substantial increases. I don't have any data to support that at this point, but that's something I'm going to keep an eye on. So the nature of the way we allocate an apportion is that it's based on a one-year enrollment. It's as of the October 1, 2025 enrollment for the FY27 assessment, the most recently available enrollment data we have. And there's a significant shift across the two towns. You can see the percentages it's almost a 2% shift from FY26 and FY27. So what we're projecting as the assessment impact would be a negative 0.9, a decrease of 0.9% for Concord and a 9.3% for Carlisle. And then for future years, the assumptions I made, and this is a crude model right now, like there's factors I think we need to look at more, but the assumptions I made right now are, if you take our existing enrollments in each grade and just assume that they're going to move on to the next grade, that's how I came up with FY 28, 29, 30, and 31. So if more students elect to go to private school in one town or less, that could shift those numbers.
or Concord, get one of the apartment complexes comes
Yeah.
online in Concord, that's gonna swing this somewhat, so. But the smartest thing today was to do the actuals, and
Yeah.
we can all discuss the what-ifs.
So I also, I just will point out one other thing. If there's a change, I had done some sensitivity analysis. I can't recall if I shared this with Brian or
We shared it with
Brian
the school
McLean,
committee, I
the
don't
school
know if we did
committee.
it to the towns.
And I can share that separately because I don't know where that is on my computer right now and I didn't think about it. But I did some sensitivity analysis to say, if you had one additional student at Carlisle compared to these numbers, and one less student in Concord, or vice versa, what the impact was.
Yeah.
And you can see what the dollar impact is for that. And I'm happy to share that to the two chairs after the meeting as a follow-up. It's,
Bob, presumably that would be that per student cost, times two, I guess, one lower and one up.
Yeah, it's more trying to break out the impact of shifts in enrollment, and it makes sense when I say this, but I needed Bob to show me the numbers to go, oh, every student difference in Carlisle is exponentially more impactful than in Concord, because Concord has has 3/4 of the population, and you have a quarter in general, so proportionally, it's not 1 for 1 in each community. Your shifts in Carlisle have more impact on yours. Certainly when the number goes up towards Carlisle, it's a bigger,
As a percentage.
as a percentage.
Yes.
That's the dollar
Yeah,
amount.
yeah.
So the 10% or the 9% they're seeing would have to be like a whole different scenario that you couldn't even imagine for it to happen to Concord, to have that kind of number.
Yeah.
So I think there is some level of like, let's all process that and think on how we mitigate that somewhat, because it's so substantial.
The dollar shift is the same, but the percentage impact
Yes.
is much
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
That's right.
yeah, it's 3 times there's 3 times as much impact to Carlisle.
Yeah.
You have 3 times as many students, so it
Yeah.
cushions it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And there's a simple model I created that I can share.
yeah, the
with you so
model
you can see
helped
it.
me go, oh, that's why it's so significant this year.
You know, when I send it, there's other information that would be helpful. You know, we understand this is hard data to absorb, and if there's other information we can provide, we will. We're also certainly open to feedback on the projections that we do. This year, we wanted to do it in a way where we felt we owned the data and not rely on NESDEC.
Right.
And we're not going to
Part of how we got.
use them this year. And we want to build a model that makes sense to us, that we can explain, and if it's off, we at least know what we assumed. And
Cool.
Yeah.
I would just say that the question I had for CPS would apply here as well, which is about the per student basis under question 1.2, as well as the complete questions 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6 from the request letter. Thanks.
what was 1.2?
1.2 was just looking at spending in total dollars and on a per student basis.
Okay.
So we kind of normalize for the enrollment changes.
I can do just a follow-up memo.
Any other questions? Anybody online?
We go around the Carlisle
Oh, yeah.
FinCom first.
Oh, yeah.
We don't do the round robin style, so I'll just ask, anyone, do you have any questions?
No?
Anyone
was very
online from,
helpful.
yeah, thank you. Anyone online from Carlisle have any questions?
Nope, no question here.
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. We'll see
Yes,
you.
thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah,
for-
thank
We'll
you.
be back.
Thank you for the effort
I know
and the
you will.
time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Great, so I think we can adjourn our joint meeting, right? Okay, so I'd like to adjourn the joint meeting of the Carlisle and Concord Finance Committees. Do I have a or do I have a motion, right?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and could I have a motion to adjourn the Carlisle part of the joint meeting to adjourn?
So moved?
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second?
All right, and could we do a roll call? Catachio, aye?
Leland, aye.
Yang I.
Schoberg, aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we reconvene, right?
I guess, if we have more business.
We have the guidelines. Do you have anything you want to say about guidelines? We are going to discuss factors to be considered in establishing guidelines.
Sure, I don't have any slides, but we can
Okay.
discuss it. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so we're gonna call. our-
Reopen.
Okay, say it again?
We will do a roll call to reopen our.
We're gonna reopen the Concord Finance Committee meeting, and we'll do a roll call to get that started.
Thank you. Peggy Briggs?
Yes.
Thank you. Brian Conway?
Present?
Kathy Kupala? Thank you. Eric Dahlberg?
Here.
John Garofalo?
Here.
Pat Guyer here. Don Kupka?
Here.
Lindsay Liss?
Here.
Paul Rodriguez?
Here.
Shri Tupel?
Here.
Great. And Lois Waska?
Here.
Excellent. We have a quorum.
All right, fantastic. So the final item on our agenda, well, before recapping action items, is to talk about the FY27 budget guidelines and discuss some of the factors to be considered in establishing the guidelines this year.
All right, thank you. So there were three topics I'd like to have some discussion from the committee. One is whether or not to continue to exclude out-of-district placements from the guidelines. The second one will be capital, whether or not, I guess that has multiple parts, but whether Tier 1 should be back inside the guidelines or not, and then whether there should be some guidance on Tier 2. And the third question, which was partially answered, I think, tonight by the schools, is should we have an enrollment modifier to the schools' budgets to account for the declining enrollment? So first topic was out-of-district placements. Historically, that was within guidelines, and the schools had to adjust for whatever happened. Last year, for the first time, we took it out of guidelines. The schools are appreciative. It seems as though it was good timing in that there was a big change. What we heard tonight is that it's a zero-based budget anyway, so if out-of-district placements are down, which they will be, that will simply reduce that spending, whether it's in guidelines or out of guidelines. I'd like to hear what members think. Should we continue to leave the out-of-district placements outside of guidelines, or should we include them within guidelines as we historically did? Anyone have any thoughts?
I'll speak. So I still think it represents a risk that they have to plan into their overall budget, that if we remove the need for them to incorporate risk that they can't control out of their budget, they can focus on things that they can control, and we can have stronger guidelines. So even though it's not as substantial as it was, it still kind of alleviates that, and the point still makes the same.
Mhm. Good point. Any hands raised? Doesn't appear to be. Any other views? Thanks.
Go ahead, Eric.
I think you make a good point, Paul. My own thinking on this is that we did this last year. Speaking for myself, I can't speak for the whole committee. I voted to do this last year with the sense that this was a one-time thing. It was not something we would necessarily do every year. At a minimum, we would call the question every year. It wouldn't be automatic. So it's good we're having this discussion. But I think as we heard tonight, they're in a different place on this. And there are a lot of areas of uncertainty in any budget. So I would not, based on what we heard tonight, I would not support doing it this year.
Okay. Oh, Lois.
Yeah, we'll do Lois and then Pat.
Yeah, I agree with what Eric's saying. I think it's perfectly appropriate for us to consider this again next year. But based on what we heard tonight, I don't think we need to do it this year. So I would be inclined to keep out-of-district placements within the guidelines this year.
I would like for this to be a discussion every year,
Yeah.
honestly. I do believe this year, I would like to have it in because they are managing it. I mean, one of their game plans is to lower this based on how they're seeing their special ed programs in the CPS side of things. So I agree, Paul, that it is as imponderable as insurance.
Right.
But I think they have more control now than they might have had in the past because Laurie has an effective program in place, trying, again, X any new people coming in, but trying to really manage that number as especially the students come out of the CPS side into the CCRD side, where the expense is huge.
Yeah.
So I would like for it to go back in, and I'd like to entertain this every year, really to monitor how that progress is going.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, John?
Well, if out of district is out of their control, and it's nice that they have processes in place, but they can't control how those students progress and if their needs change or who's coming in.
Again.
Hello? I'm not sure why we yo-yo back and forth in terms of deciding when it's a good time to plan and put it in and put it out. I would think it's out of their control. We had that huge discussion last year about it. It's great. Maybe it gets to zero because they bring it all in. But if we force a guideline and it's changes, that's going to create drastic problems for the rest of the budget that maybe is more in the control all the per pupil stuff that Don is constantly asking for, which is really good. And I don't think those are apples to apples. So I could be totally confused and misguided here, but I would think I would vote to keep it the way it is. And I honestly wouldn't vote to look at it every year because maybe they bring it down to zero, and that's great. But this is almost like a fixed cost that's not fixed but it's something they have to pay, as they described it last year. They don't have a choice. So correct me where I'm wrong.
That raises a question in my mind. Does anyone on the committee know a student or a family where there was an out-of-district placement and could speak to it from that experience? Because I do, but I'd like to hear if anybody else does before I speak. Oh, Peggy has her hand raised.
Oh, I was just going to agree with John. I think, we set this up last year. I thought that was going to be, how we were going to do it from now on. And I'm not really in favor of jumping back and forth.
Don, before you share your experience, so one of the things that I think Lori did a great job of was bringing so many of these out-of-district folks in district, right? In her first few years, which helped keep their budget increases lower. Where is her incentive to continue that effort if these remain? So I liked what we did last year, and I kind of want to keep it, but I'm just trying to understand where the checks are on that piece of it, where she kept her she reduced operating costs quite a bit in this area by bringing folks in district, right? So does her motivation to continue to do that change if we permanently leave this outside of guidelines? That's my only concern.
Lindsay, that directly speaks to the point that my only data point, which is a sample of one, is a family that we know well, knew their children from birth, where one student was given an out-of-district placement. I didn't even know it was an out-of-district placement until this summer, till it was 4th of July, we were together. And I said, why did you decide to send that one to private school? He said, oh, we didn't. And the whole story came out. And I can tell you that if any of us met that student, you wouldn't say this student has such issues that they have to be given an out-of-district placement. And in that case, I don't want to say too much, but I also think there is some more discretion in this than we might otherwise think. In fact, we heard from the school committee previously that we never see these people because they're so severely disabled. They're not in our community. Well, this one was working part-time through high school and then in a customer service-facing role and speaks well, and there's absolutely no indication other than I know a bit of a backstory, which I don't want to go into, but I don't see any reason why they were taken out of the public schools. And as a result, it was so detrimental to their sense of self-esteem because suddenly they were in with another school with people who were severely disabled. And it sort of lowered their self-image. So that's in my mind. And I have to say, I'm biased because of that experience. It's a sample size of one, which is not good. But if we make it easy, and it did help to eliminate a problem at the school by sending that student away, then, but that wasn't for the best interest of that student in the end. That's what the parents believe.
I think we gotta be really careful about these personal stories because there's so many on the opposite of that spectrum.
No
where
doubt.
A lot of the
No
parents
doubt.
fight because the services aren't there. So I think going down this rabbit hole is not really helpful. And,
I wanted to share because I am
But
biased because of that
and
experience.
then I
That's all.
think you have to vote accordingly and acknowledge that bias, but let's not take us all down there.
So I sit on the board of the Carroll School as a trustee for schools specifically for dyslexia for the greater region. And there are a number of people that get sent to that school because of that. I don't know if Concord has any out-of-school placements there, but there are a lot of communities that do. And, you don't, I know that I am not an educator. I know I'm not an expert, but I do know that the people who do get that specialized education, which is just an example of, need it, and it's a useful thing. I also know that those communities can't afford to have the same level of program for that individual, and it is more beneficial for them to, rather than recreate it, they send somebody to a place where they can get the help that they need. And it's just the luck of the draw of whether those people are in your community or not. So I just wanted to bring that up too.
That's good. Thank you. That's good.
Excuse me, so Don, you have three elements, right? So you had the first one, you're kind of a mix there. Do you want to do a straw poll or, just trying to move things along? You have three elements that you were asking.
I wanted to take
decide
to vote. Thank you, Ron. If out-of-district placement will be in or out of guidelines, and I guess.
I think we want to have a couple more comments
Yeah,
on this one, though. I know you have a comment, and I had a comment too, but go ahead.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay. Well, to that point, I thought the way we teed it up last year, now, this is easy for me to say because I'm not the one who's going to have to put together the workbook, but I thought the way we teed it up last year was really good. It was a ton of work on your part, Lindsay, but you presented us with options, and we had the chance to consider and ultimately vote on the option we wanted. Nothing prevents us from, Dawn, you'd probably be on the hook to do this, so it's a big ask, but have an option with this in guidelines, and then another option with it out of guidelines. And we could vote accordingly. We can't require this to be permanently in or out. We can't tie the hands of future FinComs that you have to, this is always out. We, in 2025, said so. We don't have the authority to do that. So the best we can do is consider it every year anyway.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also clarify something I said earlier with where's the incentive? I think from an education perspective, they made it clear it's better to have in district anyway, as much as possible for the social, emotional reasons and for the oversight that they can provide to that education. So I just wanted to clarify, it's not always a financial, obviously, decision for the superintendent.
Peggy with her hand up.
Yeah, and we have one more hand up, and then we can we can do the poll. Go ahead, Peggy.
Yeah, we are not the school committee.
Yeah.
So, interesting points, but we are not the school committee. That's all I want to say.
Yeah,
Great point.
agree. Okay, so straw poll, and I would say, should we pursue Eric's idea of looking at it both ways?
Yes.
So I guess there are three options here. Pat, what would you like to do?
I would like,
Before we actually take a straw poll, should we be taking a straw poll? I think Eric made an excellent point about looking at this both ways when we do the more detailed analysis next week when we're actually voting on guidelines. I mean,
Yeah.
So I don't know that a straw poll is necessary on this right now.
Okay.
I think we've started the conversation. We can look at the financial impact of it both ways and make a decision when we have fuller information. And if people want to do some kind of a straw poll now, it's fine, but that's my thought.
I think that makes sense, and I think that probably there's no downside to that solution, so let's do that. The next question is Tier 1 capital, in or out of guidelines? Anyone have any strong feel? I presented it in our last meeting, that when we took it out of guidelines, it went up dramatically.
Is that true of both the schools and the town?
That was true.
Didn't we take?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the town, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, and we did that because we saw advantages to having the treatment be the same for both the school and the town. So just to frame the conversation about that, do we still think that's, because historically what had happened is there was a separate warrant article for the school's Capital One. I don't know that I have a strong feeling about this right now, one way or the other, but I agree we should have a conversation about it.
Thank you.
I think it should be in. My position is it should be in, and it's for the reason you alluded to. We took it out and it exploded, and that's not necessarily the reason why, but I think it should be in.
For town and schools, and be
Right.
consistent, okay. Anyone else have a feeling?
I would say if it's going to be in, I would encourage us to look at a different methodology,
Okay.
not just percent increase from a prior year, which is how it was done when it was in guidelines.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe,
Thought?
yeah, which we talked about a little bit at the last meeting as like percent of assets,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
I'm for having some sort of guideline that tracks to the right metric,
Yeah.
as Lindsay suggested.
Yeah.
I would keep it in guidelines, so that basically the outlay every year is tracked together, like 3%, 3.5%, whatever.
Does anyone have the opposing view, or feel that it shouldn't be in?
I agree that it should be in.
Okay, all right, seems like we have consensus, and I agree, Lindsay, that we need a different methodology than a percentage increase over the previous year. And would be nice if it was tied to the asset base, but, okay, Tier 2 capital, I think it's really the same question. That's just borrowed capital, and we were looking at debt service. Again, we saw big growth in the debt service. Does anyone look at Tier 2 differently from Tier 1, Tier 2 debt service? No, okay.
Does anyone know if there's any history of Tier 2 being included in guidelines in Concord? Not that it matters, just curious.
Okay. So how does this sound? If we ask our acting CFO to help us to look at the asset schedule and the life of assets, sort of what, a depreciation schedule, if you will.
And the salvage value.
Salvage value. And come up with what is a realistic, reasonable figure in that regard. And then take a look at that relative to our spending.
Is it specific to tier 2 spending?
I think we should look at both, but I know tier 1 can be a little tricky because not always in an asset schedule, right? You don't always know something that's expensed essentially. But to the extent that you have visibility, just so that we don't do something that makes no sense.
Right, so that one maybe has to be % of operating budget instead of
Yes.
assets, yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that the state does give some guidance
Yeah.
on tier 1 spending as a %, they don't call it that.
Mhm.
But, as, they look at tier 1 plus debt service as a percentage of the total budget.
Yeah,
um,
okay.
and where that should be, so we can look at that. Okay, great. And so unless anyone has anything else to say on debt, finally, school enrollment modifier, I would say I expected to see a bigger impact from the schools. I don't know if you've had a chance to really read the response to that question, but it implies very, very, very small delta in expenses when enrollment goes up or down. I think if we don't track it, it's going to be awfully hard for future FinComs if the budget goes up and the budget we ask, right? And we hear, well, we have all these additional students. So, having some sort of a modifier in there that at least is part of our process makes some sense. And if unless anyone feels strongly otherwise, I'll take what they've done here and create that modifier because it's something in which, we all can agree, the schools and the FinCom.
So the only comment I have for that is, I think we just also need to avoid forcing like a linear relationship into a complicated situation. Because what I heard from Lori over and over again was, it is in a linear relationship. It is hard, it depends on where the people are, and it depends on how we can move sections around and things like that.
Yep.
I'm not saying that we can't see some sort of correlation, but we should just avoid assuming that it's a perfect correlation.
Of course, and that's why we asked them to propose the units of this, 25, 50 students, as they did, and then roughly how many variable dollars per unit, which they did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, all right, that's it.
Okay. All right, so the last item on the agenda is a recap of action items. So there were a bunch of action items for the schools, so I know that they need to follow up on requests 1.2, then 6.3 through 6.6 on both letters for CPS and CCRSD. They need to provide the Concord Carlisle dollar per student change that would happen if a Concord student, if we're +1 or -1 with Concord Carlisle for CCRSD budgeting, and they were going to provide the CPS and CCHS enrollment numbers, not just the percentages on the overall budget itself. They were also, I think those are like kind of the main things that they're going to follow up on. Don, you're going to show some scenario analysis for tier 1 and 2, some scenario analysis for the out of district.
Yep.
And with tier 1 and 2, we are going to look at potentially including them in the guidelines. And to do that, you're going to need some follow-up from Ryan with the asset schedule and the life of assets and total assets. And we may look at different methodologies for each of those. And then I know we need to adjust the minutes slightly. And
We'll take care of that.
and that might, and then later this year, probably not in this guidelines process, we might want to talk with Carlisle about this rolling average idea, and can we figure out maybe an average of 3 to 5 years for enrollment shifts, and how can we manage that to lessen the impact on Carlisle budgets for CCRSD each year? But that's probably not going to happen this year, but maybe next year, right? Okay.
So that is a long and complicated process, and it's not just impacting Carlisle, it also impacts us from year to year.
Sure, of course,
I mean, sometimes we get hit with that.
yeah. Yep. Anything that I missed?
And I don't think you missed anything, Lindsay. I just think we should keep in mind that we are, still on track. We're going to have a little preview of the agenda for the October 30th is a lot of the time's going to be taken up with the town presentation. And then the goal is still to vote on preliminary guidelines by the end of the meeting, October 30th. We have the option, perhaps, of setting an additional meeting in early November if we really need it to vote on preliminary guidelines, but they are preliminary. It would be good to have made some decisions about what's in them, but if we're comfortable doing it, I hope that we can set the preliminary guidelines at our next meeting. The town and the schools are not going to be that much further along in their budgeting process by mid-November. So I don't think we're going to get a lot of additional information from those two sources. And I think the preliminary guidelines are just that. They give the town and the schools a sense of where we're headed while they are really in the depth of their process of actually developing their FY27 budgets. So if we can do it, if we feel that it's responsible to do it, that should be the goal for the next meeting. So when we're thinking about the materials we need to prepare, the materials that Don needs to put together and have ready to present after Ryan's presentation, I'd just like everybody to keep that goal in mind. The final guidelines don't get set until December. These are the preliminary guidelines based on our evaluation of what's going on in the world and the information that we've gotten.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one other maybe to-do issue. If there is other data that has been developed that's relevant to the metrics we discussed, we should be ready to talk about that at our next meeting too.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? All right, then I think we can adjourn for the second time the Concord Finance Committee meeting. I know, maybe the third time.
I make said motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved, right?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.